This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Been a long education.
Yeah, you know, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
I'm Kyle Mullen, editor of the MERS newsletter, filling in for Steve Gruber today, the 20th of November. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a great broadcast for you today. A little later, the Attorney General for the state of Michigan, Bill Schuette, is supposed to join us. And we've got a lot of other great guests, and we're also going to be teeing up the big game this weekend, Michigan State versus Ohio State. Tim Stout is going to be joining us to talk about that big game. It's got big implications. Who's going to advance in the Big Ten East? Who has the chance to be a national championship? Both of those questions will be answered after that game. But first, we've got some breaking news going on in Mali. A company that runs the Radisson Blu Hotel in Mali's capital says assailants have taken 170 hostages in a brazen assault involving grenades. The group says the assailants have locked in 140 guests and 30 employees. The Malian army commander says 10 gunmen stormed the hotel this morning, shouting the equivalent of "God is great" in Arabic before firing on the guards and taking hostages. The U.S. and French embassies are asking their citizens to take shelter where they are in Bamako. Following a military coup in 2012, Islamic extremists took control of northern Mali, prompting a French-led military intervention in early 2013. The extremists were scattered from northern towns and cities through the north and remains insecure. Militant attacks have extended to the south this year. Well, we've got some new news from France. France's Prime Minister Manuel Valls said Friday some of the Paris attackers, including the mastermind Abd al-Hamid Abaoud, exploited the Syrian refugee crisis to slip into the country undetected. Abaoud, the ringleader behind last Friday's bombings and shootings in the French capital that killed 129 people, was able to get to Europe undeterred, according to French authorities. The 28-year-old had also been linked to several plots around France, including a thwarted attack by a gunman on a high-speed train in August. This is all according to Fox News. French officials confirmed Thursday Abaoud was killed in an anti-terror raid Wednesday in a suburb north of Paris. He was identified from skin samples after the Saint Denis apartment raid. I'm still wondering if he died in the gunfire with authorities or if he died because his sister or whoever that was who was with him detonated herself, the bomb. He was just a suicide bombing victim, or if the authorities got to him first. But I don't know. Maybe we'll have to wait for the movie to find out for sure. Let's get a little closer to home here. Scientists say water levels in the Great Lakes should remain mostly above average over the next 6 months as a powerful El Nino gives the region a break after two bitterly cold winters. In a forecast released Thursday, federal agencies say the periodic warming of Pacific waters should bring above normal temperatures, although there will be some cold snaps. The region likely will get some snow, but not as much as in the past 2 years. These conditions are not expected to alter the usual pattern of water levels rising in spring, peaking in the summer, and declining in the fall. This fall's drop-off may be smaller than usual because milder temperatures are reducing evaporation rates. Well, you could fool me that it's going to get warmer out there. Boy, you know that winter's coming. I opened up the door today and thought I was walking into a freezer. It's below freezing temperatures here in Lansing, 31 degrees. Supposed to get a high of 43 at some point, but you know that it's Silver Bells in Lansing when it gets bitterly cold. Has there ever been a Silver Bells in the city of Lansing that was not freezing cold? If there has, please let me know. In fact, give me a call if you can remember a Silver Bells in Lansing that was not freezing cold. 888-900 9966. I'm going to go ahead and dare, or not challenge. This is a challenge. Challenge me if you have been at a Silver Bells that was not freezing cold. And for our listeners who are not from Lansing, Silver Bells is our annual festival that we have. The Friday evening before Thanksgiving, we light a big Christmas tree in front of the state capitol, and then we do fireworks. And this year we actually have got a real good act afterwards. Joshua Davis, who is on The Voice, was in a band called 19 Wheels, 18 Wheels, one or the other. A popular band here in Lansing is going to be performing at the Lansing Center afterwards. And, you know, they used to have these concerts after the fireworks and whatever, right on the Capitol steps, but it was so cold that the musicians said they couldn't control their fingers when they were playing the guitars, so they had to go ahead and book the Lansing Center so that folks afterwards could just roam down Michigan and go ahead and check out the concert, and that's what's going to happen later today anyway. At least it's not going to be as cold as in Marquette. They're looking at a high of 34 today and 24 low. Cadillac and Charlevoix, as you're going up north, they're expecting snow today. 36 is the high, 23 is the low. In Cadillac, Charlevoix is going to be a little warmer, 38 and 29. Let's go ahead and take a look at some more news here. French Interior Minister Bernard Chavagneux is asking his European Union partners to toughen the bloc's borders and move forward on a long-delayed system for collecting airline passenger information. Chavagneux is telling them, "We cannot take more time. This is urgent." His call comes at the start of an emergency meeting of EU Interior and Justice ministers in Brussels aimed at a fine-tuning of European security response to the attacks in Paris a week ago, in which 129 people were killed. It's going to reboot this Syrian refugee topic. We talked a bit about that yesterday. We've got a few guests a little later going to be talking about it as well. The White House is calling for changes that could prohibit some people from bypassing the traditional visa system to enter the United States. White House spokesman saying the administration wants to work with Congress on tweaking the visa waiver program. Comments come a day after President Obama was rebuked by many in his own party in the debate over the Syrian refugee crisis. The House on Thursday overwhelmingly backed onerous hurdles for Syrian refugees, despite Obama's veto threat. President Obama is also asking young people in Southeast Asia to reject violent extremists and embrace tolerance. Obama says the next generation of leaders will have to combine an appreciation of their own culture with a modern world. He also says the future contrasts with the terrible vision embraced by the perpetrators of the attacks in Paris with what he sees on the ground with today's young people is pretty striking. Obama was speaking to some 500 participants in the White House's Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative. Obama noted his personal connection to the region. He lived in Indonesia as a child, and his half-sister was born there. Obama says the Asia-Pacific is, quote, part of who I am and how I see the world. The stop is one of many in his 9-day trip to Turkey, the Philippines, and Malaysia. All right, well, we've got a lot of news coming, got a lot of news here at home. Take a look through the MERS newsletter when we come back. Talk about some state issues, including a new sticky issue that Governor Snyder's walked into, the Detroit Public Schools Initiative. What are we going to do to bail that district out of its $500 million debt, or should we at all? Talk about that when we come back. You're listening to The Steve Gruber Show. I'm Kyle Mullen. We'll be back.
Michigan, born and raised with Midwestern values and Michigan common sense.
You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side.
You're listening to The Steve Gruber Show. I'm Kyle Mullen, editor of the MERS newsletter, filling in today. Well, Steve is outside hunting deer. Allegedly, he's got a cold one out there. Man, 31 degrees here in Lansing, and it feels all 31 of it. I was waiting to get my gloves on there and start shoveling snow, as cold as it was. Folks up in Charlevoix, Cadillac, northern areas of this state, looking at a little snow today as we're quickly approaching Thanksgiving and then Christmas. Got some news here in Michigan that I think is going to be pretty interesting. We've obviously pushed this road funding debate off now that the governor has signed legislation that over time will raise $1.2 billion for Michigan's roads. But now he's jumped into another very sticky issue, and that's what to do with the Detroit Public School District. Now, this is a school district that has lost a significant number of their students. At one point, they were at around 150,000 students, down to 50,000 students, down to about a third. A lot of reasons for that. Some would say schools of choice has brought some of these kids out to some of the suburban areas. We've also had an expansion of charter schools, so now we have kids taking care of those options. Cyber schools probably chipped into it a little bit. But as this school district has lost students, it's also lost its state per pupil funding. That's how a lot of school districts are funded. It's through the state. You get paid by how many students you have. And as the Detroit public school system has lost its students, it's lost a lot of its funding and is now in a significant deficit situation. The debt is roughly around $500 million. And the folks in Detroit say, hey, listen, this is Lansing's problem. Lansing created the environment that has caused all our students to leave the Detroit public school system. They put in emergency managers who have then tried to right-size the district, have closed dozens of schools. But in the end, we've still got a significant deficit on our hands. And whose problem is this? Is this Lansing's problem? Is this Michigan's problem? Is this Detroit's problem? Is it all of our problem? Well, this is a problem. Nonetheless, whoever's problem it is, Governor Snyder is determined to help fix. And for most of the year, he's been working with officials within Detroit, public leaders, community leaders, folks within the school community to say, all right, how can we recreate the Detroit public school system and schools in Detroit in general to some kind of system that works, that fits the number of students it has today, while also taking care of its debt situation. Now, one of the answers that Governor Snyder has kind of stuck with, kind of his base model here, is closing the Detroit public school system as it is and creating a brand new one. The old one would have the debt, would continue to have the debt, and would only exist to basically pay off the debt over time. And then a new school district would start with a clean slate. And this school district would be overseen ultimately by an appointed panel to make sure that things are not running amok as far as the finances. There's a lot of controversy on exactly what this is going to look like and how the control is going to be managed. Of course, that's always the big issue in Detroit. Who's going to control things? Who isn't going to control things? How much say are the people in Detroit going to have? How much say is Lansing going to have? And then there's the big question, though, here in the state capitol. How are we going to take care of the debt? Now, Governor Snyder has put something on the table that is stretched over 10 years. He would like to see state resources put in at a significant level. And lawmakers obviously are kind of balking at that because they say, hey, listen, if we're going to start putting state money into the Detroit public school system, where are we taking the money out of? Is this money ultimately coming out of other school districts? And so lawmakers say, okay, well, $715 million is kind of the magic number that's out there. We're going to stretch this out over 10 years. Yeah, that's a lot of money over time. And again, if you're taking it out of the school districts throughout the state, is that fair? Well, then the other question is, well, if you don't take it out of the other school districts, where are you taking it out from? Because you're already taking money out from different funds for this new road funding package as an example. So where's the money going to come from? Well, one of the answers that have been on the table, or that lawmakers kind of pushed on, said, well, listen, let's try and get the philanthropists, that community that helped with the grand bargain, that helped bail out the city of Detroit. Let's try and get them involved. Maybe we can kind of rally the philanthropists again, like the Skillman Foundation, for example, and kick in a little money for this debt. So it's not $715 million on the state of Michigan. Maybe it's something else. Well, Tanya Allen, the head of the Coalition for the Future of Detroit School Children, and also one of the co-directors of the Skillman Foundation, was at a press conference on Wednesday, and she basically said, Her quote was, "We will not make investments to bad debt that was mismanaged. And while DPS was under the state's watch, that just isn't a good use of our dollars. Well, Kevin Cotter, the Speaker of the House, was not happy with that response. He thought that it was a cynical community coalition that was playing the blame game on how DPS got where it had to get. And his reaction was, blaming the state for the financial failures of DPS is like blaming a relief pitcher who enters the game in the ninth inning already down 20 runs. It is both an absurd claim and a ridiculous discussion that offers nothing productive to the conversation. If the coalition is so hell-bent on preventing a deal to reform Detroit schools, they should do the right thing for the kids and stand aside so the rest of us can work together to fix this mess. Whew. Well, things aren't getting off to a good start here on this DPS discussion, is it? Join us on the line here, Steve from Lansing. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning. Yesterday, you and I talked about financing of the roads, and you made a comment that MDOT is in debt. Is that? And you threw some number out there. Did I understand you correctly?
Yes, that the state of Michigan does have significant road funding debt. Yes, I'll go ahead and try and find that number. And we can talk about that on the flip side of the break here. You're listening to the Steve Gruber Show. I'm Kyle Malin, editor of the MERS newsletter, filling in today. We're going to be back right after these messages, and I'll answer that question for Steve.
The Steve Gruber Show, American values with Midwestern common sense.
I hope I'm not telling you any lies. Not even sweet little lies. That would be even worse. But I want to bring Steve back from Lansing. I had to put him on hold while we went to the break. Oh, Steve's gone. Okay. All right. Well, very good. We've got a next guest here. An exhaustive new study from the Center for Union Facts has found that $140 million, or 99% of all union political contributions, go to Democrat or liberal causes. That's according to a new report by the Franklin Center's Thomas L. Rhodes Fellow. And joining us here to talk about that is Jillian Melchior, writing for the National Review. Thanks for joining us today, ma'am.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Now, I guess I shouldn't be surprised by this at all, but Planned Parenthood received $435,000 from union member dues in 2014, and Al Sharpton's nonprofit received more than $680,000 from union dues. And I'm sure the point you're going to make is, I'm quite sure that a good chunk of union members wouldn't agree that their dues go to those causes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think what Center for Union Facts did that's so important is it looks at political spending from dues alone. Now, this is what you have to pay to either belong to a union, or if you're in a non-right-to-work state, it's a condition of your employment. You end up paying money to the union whether you belong to it or not. And what we're finding out is that this political spending in no way matches up with the makeup of many union households. I mean, consistently between 35 and 40% of union households lean right, lean Republican. I believe the statistic was around 40% voted for Mitt Romney, actually, in 2012. And union political spending simply isn't reflecting the political diversity of its members.
Now, you could make the argument, though, is that to donate to Democrats, though, are helping union causes. They are more likely to vote against things like right to work, or in this state, we've got another big issue going on right now about repealing the prevailing wage law in this state. Obviously, Democrats are the leaders against that kind of initiative. So you could say that to a certain extent, that spending is justified to Democratic causes.
Well, I think it works the other way, too. What we really see is the emergence of unions as a special interest group. Democrats certainly rely on that money, and it finances many of their campaigns. I think it's very difficult, even when you have unions acting in a truly abusive fashion, to curtail that in, because it's kind of a, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours sort of political thing. But the sad thing is that many of these union members, particularly in non-right-to-work states, are feeling really frustrated because their money is going to political causes that they don't support. They have the choice between, like, putting the money up front, ponying it up, and then trying to vote from within and cause change, or potentially suing the union. I really think this is a David and Goliath thing. It's unions using that money to buy political influence.
Now, do you believe that states that have gone to a right-to-work environment like Michigan just has made unions a little bit more conscious about how they spend their union dues? Because now under this circumstance, under right-to-work, folks can opt out of paying those dues.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it makes them a little bit more responsive to the needs and demands of their members. But in non-right-to-work states, it's a totally different equation. I mean, I spoke to this one woman, Linda Misha. She's in Pennsylvania, which remains non-right-to-work. She loves teaching, but she's also a devout Catholic, so she was horrified to find out that her union gave money, forwarded it on, dues money to NEA, which ends up supporting Planned Parenthood. Now, under the law, technically you and your union can decide on another charity that your money would go to. So she actually wanted it to go first to a pro-life group, second to a group that helps young people learn gun safety. But the union vetoed both of those. It said it was too religious, too political. Meanwhile, that union is taking more than $650 out of her paycheck, sending it on to support abortion. So she's suing over it. She has support from the Fairness Center, but many union members, particularly in non-right-to-work states, are faced with a similar situation, and they're trying to decide, do I just let the union do what it wants with that $650, even if I politically disagree with it, even if I morally disagree with it, or do I spend vastly more on a lawyer when my odds of winning are probably pretty minimal? The union can certainly afford to hire a much stronger legal team and fight.
We're talking with Jillian Melchior. She's writing in the National Review about a new report from the Franklin Center's Thomas L. Rhodes Fellow. Shows that 99% of all union political contributions go to Democratic or liberal causes. The point I want to bring up here is, and I'm just going to play a little devil's advocate here, is that you can argue that since union groups are traditionally aligned politically in trying to get the same type of candidates elected as a Planned Parenthood or, let's say a group that would be aligned with an Al Sharpton type nonprofit, that you've got kind of alliances and allegiances built up. And there is kind of this, since we're supporting you on this, we expect your support back on something we care about. I mean, isn't there something to be said for coalition building? And that's what a lot of this probably is.
Well, you can say that. I still think we've got to call a spade a spade. Unions are, in many instances, not acting as their members would want, but instead acting in a way that benefits union bosses who are living large off of these union dues. But in other cases, digging through the numbers, digging for the Center for Union Facts report, I was surprised to see some cases where it looked like unions in their coalition building, what we want to call it that, were actually donating causes that did not help their members. And I'll give you an example. There was one union in particular that was a pretty vocal advocate of the Keystone XL pipeline. They really wanted it because, it's going to provide a lot of construction jobs for union members. As we remember, this particular pipeline, most of the jobs that it would create were good-paying union jobs. But it was actually at the same time donating to an environmental group, Democratic leaning, that was very vocally advocating fighting against the Keystone XL pipeline. Well, we know what happened with the Obama administration a couple weeks ago. They vetoed the pipeline, and this green group, working with the support of unions, compulsory union dues, celebrated that as a major victory. So I just think those union members would be pretty horrified to know where their dues were going to kill jobs for them.
Well, and let's talk about a situation here in Michigan as far as unions giving their dues to in political contributions, which they obviously do, and they have every right to do that. But here in Michigan, one of the subjects on the table is repealing the state's prevailing wage law. And if you are in one of the trades unions and you obviously don't want to see this thing passed, you're going to need Republican support in the House to prevent a vote, or if it does vote, make sure that the initiative fails. And so in that case, it would seem like the unions would want to reach out to Republicans and try and get their votes on kind of one of these marginal issues to stop legislation. It doesn't seem like the end benefit of polarization works to their benefit, especially when their party's not in charge.
Well, I mean, I'd agree with you, but clearly that's not where the money is going right now. The breakdown's, I think, pretty comprehensive and really shows that they lean Democrat. But another thing that I'll point out is that if you look particularly in right-to-work states, support for unions, union membership is significantly on the decline nationwide. And I think that is reflective of union members getting fed up, saying that this does not benefit us. This benefits, in many cases, union leadership. I mean, you can go through their LM2 forms, public record, and there's one union I've been following in Pennsylvania where you can see these union bosses spending money on Coach purses, spending money at, in many cases, restaurants that they own.
Well, thanks a lot for that. Jillian Melchior, writing for the National Review. We'll be back.
Genuine Michigan common sense on display every day.
You're listening to the Steve Gruber Show. I'm Kyle Mullen, editor of the MERS newsletter, filling in today, the 20th of November. Well, yesterday, the U.S. Congress rebuffed President Obama and overwhelmingly approved a legislation that would, in effect, halt the resettlement of refugees from Syria and Iraq to the United States. Faced with a White House veto, Republican leaders in Congress are threatening to include the restrictions in a must-pass spending bill to keep the federal government running past December 11, raising the specter of another government shutdown. Joining us on the other end of the line to talk about this and other issues as it relates to the Syrian refugee situation, Raffi Williams, RNC spokesman. Thanks for joining us on the program. Good to talk to you, Raffi.
Great to talk to you, Kyle. Glad to see your guest hosting.
Yeah, isn't this exciting?
Yeah, I got a thrill.
I'm sure. So what do you make of what happened in the House yesterday? The Republicans actually got quite a bit of support from Democrats in getting this thing passed, essentially making it veto-proof.
Well, I think what you're seeing, and this is laid out by Obama's Ebola czar, Robert Klan, and it basically says that Obama is not admitting that there is a threat here. He's trying to create straw men and not address the true issues and the true fears that Americans have about refugees and ISIS. What he needs to do, as Klan laid out, is address what the issue is, tell us how he's going to deal with that crisis, and then also address whether or not there is a penalty or a problem if we don't allow refugees to come to this country. What is the negative effects of that, too? He doesn't address any of these. Instead, he tries to demonize anybody who disagrees with him. And there are a lot of Democrats that agree that we are afraid of ISIS having an attack on America. We should do everything we can to stop it. And he has not explained how his vetting program would prevent that.
Well, he's certainly not doing a good job, in my opinion, explaining his position. He's basically saying that Republicans and those who are opposed to having refugees come over in at least the near future are politically posturing. In the meantime, we're seeing from Fox News that the Prime Minister of France is saying that some of the Paris attackers, including the mastermind, Abd al-Hamid Abaoud, exploited the Syrian refugee crisis to slip into the country unnoticed. People are reading this, Raffi, and they don't agree with where the president is, and I think they're more in line with where, let's say, Rick Snyder is, and saying we got to at least look at our procedures here before we start accepting people in here.
Well, Americans 2-1 favor where people like Rick Snyder and Republicans stand on this issue, and that's why you're having so much Democrat support, because it's an honest fear, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the president needs to explain why we shouldn't be afraid, or how he's going to alleviate our fears and keep America safe, which he's not doing.
The Washington Post columnist Eugene Robinson had an assessment on Obama's tone in that it was all wrong in addressing the Paris attacks. Have you been able to take a look at his column on this?
I haven't, actually.
Okay. He published on Tuesday a column, wrote, quote, "At times he was patronizing and at other times he seemed annoyed and almost dismissive." If you want to convince the American people on your political position, you actually got to state some good, hard facts, and if not facts, at least some compassionate reasoning as to why we shouldn't be afraid of at least seeing a few Syrian refugees being infiltrated by terrorists who want to come in here and do the same type of thing here in the United States that was done in Paris over the last weekend.
Well, I think that what you're seeing here, at that press conference, he was getting so angry at reporters and accusing him of asking the same question because he wasn't answering their question.
Right.
But I also think that what you're seeing is Americans don't trust Obama when it comes to foreign policy. Remember, this is the same guy who called ISIL JV. He's the same guy who said they were contained a day before the Paris attacks. His rhetoric has never matched up with the true reality of the situation, and Americans have learned their lessons, only once.
Yeah, exactly. It seems to me that the president is trying to paint the big picture in that, look, a vast majority of the Syrian refugees are not terrorists. These are people who are coming from a region that is war-torn. They're trying to escape a war right now. They're trying to escape terror and this types of things. They're walking across Europe in huge numbers to try and get away from this. They are not necessarily terrorists themselves, but that's not really the issue here, though, is it, Raffi? I mean, the real issue is using this political situation, or this very, very unfortunate situation for terrorists to just kind of sneak in this group and kind of blend in with the refugees, because who can tell the difference necessarily between somebody who's got a terrorist background and who just is just a legitimate, everyday person in Syria who's just gotten exploited in this whole situation?
And I think that you're spot on this. The real issue here is that Syria is a war-torn, broken country at this time. There are no records. There's no paper trail of people. So it really is almost impossible to vet them. You have this interview process, but people can lie, and there's no way to prove that they're lying if there's no paper trail, birth records, etc. And so we're not saying that, every Syrian refugee is a terrorist, but what's stopping, 0.1% from being a terrorist, and that's the fear, and that's the danger, and it only takes one bad actor to have a terrible attack on America, as we've seen before.
It's interesting. We haven't necessarily seen anything in Germany yet. And Germany was the country that's been accepting these refugees from the get-go. Do you have any insight on that? What's going on in Germany, and why have they been able to put a lid on this, if they have at all?
Well, I think that Germany did a good job. Remember, earlier this week, they had the scare at the Hanover soccer stadium when the German team was to play, I believe it was Netherlands. And they were able to stop that. They think that there was a bomb in an ambulance outside the stadium. There's a lot of speculation around there. So I think Germany just was preemptive on that. I'm not sure as to why a successful attack has not happened there, but thankfully it has not. But the danger is all around us.
Just to kind of wrap a bow on this as we go on to the break here, and we've been talking with Raffi Williams, the RNC spokesperson. One thing I've not been impressed with this president with is his inaccessibility, I think, to the mainstream press. It seems like he's done a good job doing these Vogue interviews and being on Comedy Central and these kind of things. But when he's confronted with hard questions from real reporters, he shies away, gets indignant, or doesn't address questions at all. I think that is one of his major failings as a president. We're going to be back. You're listening to The Steve Gruber Show. I'm Kyle Mullen, editor of MERS.